In our addictions, my husband and I separated. We went our different ways. When you're living in a world of darkness like that, it spirals you down into separation. So my friend, we used to use together. That's how I met her. During our addictions, she went one way, I went another. And then I went to recovery. And I figured she was still out in her addiction and doing what we'd always done. So when I was in recovery and I had gone through a 6-month program, and I had heard that she was sober, I couldn't believe it, you know. Because of course in that day I probably thought that, oh, she's way worse than I am, or you know, things like that. That's what you put in your mind. And so I had to go see. I happened to hear that she was working at a Salvation Army thrift store, and I was already in my recovery, so I sought her out and I went to the thrift store, and sure enough she was there, and she was sober and clean too, and she was a different person. She was on fire for God, and she just looked different, and I desired to be happy like she was happy, because I still didn't feel joyous yet. I was clean and sober, but I didn't have God yet. So I was still not very happy. It was a great reunion, and then she said, "You gotta come to church." And I said, "Church? What? No." And she said, yes, come to the church. It's at the Salvation Army, it's great. And I told her she was crazy, and then she said, okay, then you can just come to one of the programs. They have a recovery program there, a recovery meeting. And that seemed a little bit easier to me, so I said, okay, I'll try that. And I went there, and she was also running that meeting. I stayed, and I liked that meeting a lot because it was based out of the Bible. And I hadn't been to a recovery meeting that was like that. So I stayed, came to that meeting, and then she still invited me to church on Sunday. I was really apprehensive about that, but I showed up. And once I showed up and walked in the doors and sat in the pews, I couldn't leave. I remember sitting there thinking, I am scared to be here, but I couldn't leave. And then every Sunday after that, and every Tuesday after that, and every Wednesday after that, I continued to come. I had been coming to the core for probably 3 or 4 Sundays in a row, and meetings in a row, the recovery meetings, the women's meetings, and I think it was about the 4th Sunday that I had been there, and I saw somebody get enrolled as a soldier, and I didn't really understand it all, and I remember asking my friend, so how do I get baptized? And she sat me down and she said, you know, we don't baptize in the Salvation Army, but you can accept Christ anytime you want to. You can go to the altar. I will go with you right now, she said, of course, because my friend was always like, right now is the moment. And I was like, no, So I asked her, well, can I do it by myself? And she said, of course. And she explained to me that I could go to the Lord and ask Him into my heart at any time. And that evening, I went home, and my four-year-old daughter, her and I together, I was putting her to bed at bedtime, and I said, hey, do you want to ask God to be your Savior? And of course, she's 4, she doesn't know. And she's like, yeah. And so that night, in a bedtime prayer, I asked the Lord to be my Savior. And she did too. I mean, hopefully someday she'll do it on her own, but we did it together. And not everything changed immediately after that, of course. I mean, everything wasn't roses the next day, but life was different. I desired a different life. I wanted to leave my old life behind. My husband and I separated. We went our different ways. Eventually we started talking again. He started coming to see our daughter. And I fell in love with him again. I found that he had also accepted Christ, and God just started rebuilding our lives together instead of apart. And all of a sudden, we desired to renew our covenant with each other, but this time with God as the center. and we asked the Corps officers there to marry us again. And we remarried in that Corps, in our uniforms, without Christ and without accepting Him as our Savior, without deciding that we want to live for Him. The healing of all the pain from the past wouldn't have been possible. When you're in your addictions, you go through so many things, and you do things to each other that are terrible. You do things to family that are terrible. You do things to strangers that are terrible. And through God's love and forgiveness, He has healed all of that.